I'm Shannon Tiezi from the Diplomat, and I'm here at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, where I'm happy to be joining Bonnie Glaser, who is a Senior Advisor for Asia here at CSIS. On March 19th, a group of several hundred, mostly student protesters, occupied Taiwan's legislative Yuan in protest of a pending Cross-Strait Service Trade Agreement between China and Taiwan. Several thousand additional protesters were outside of the legislative Yuan, and the protests have only increased since then, with the protest on March 30th attracting several 100,000 protesters outside of the presidential office. We're very happy to have you with us today, Bonnie, to help us sort through some of these issues.
Thank you.
To begin with, could you just provide some background about the agreement at the center of these protests, the Cross-Strait Service Trade Agreement? What is really involved in this pact, and what are both Taiwan and China expecting to gain from this deal?
Well, the Cross-Strait Trade and Services Agreement is a follow-on for the agreement that was signed in 2010, the Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement, known as ECFA, between mainland China and Taiwan. So this is a follow-on agreement, and after this will be a merchandise agreement that is currently under negotiation. So this agreement was signed in June of 2013 and has been awaiting ratification by Taiwan's legislature and has been very, very controversial. And so because of the fact that it has not yet been passed, the KMT was frustrated with the filibustering the opposition from the DPP and really tried to push it through the committee to a vote, and that is what prompted the protests. But the agreement itself will allow for the opening up of services trade between mainland China and Taiwan, and in fact will open up about 64 in services in Taiwan and 80 on mainland China. So in Taiwan, this is areas like hospitals, traditional Chinese medicine, tourism, telecommunications, construction, a whole range of services area. And then on the mainland, some similar things, telecommunications, including e-commerce, elderly and handicap services, the motion picture production service industry. So potentially could be very, I think, beneficial to both sides. But it comes against the background of a perception in Taiwan that Taiwan is too dependent on mainland China economically, and that the mainland is penetrating Taiwan's economy, and that it is not bringing benefits to the people of Taiwan in an even-handed way. So some of the people who are lower class or working class are benefiting less. And there is just concern about the vulnerability of Taiwan going forward to too much dependence on the mainland economically.
So do you think these protests are mostly being driven by this sort of existential concern towards China and not by the specific economic components of the deal?
I think it's both. I think there are specific economic concerns. Big business in Taiwan will benefit. Some of the smaller businesses may not. But this is true, of course, of any free trade agreement. There are winners and there are losers. And so the losers are certainly concerned about the economic impact. I think the opposition party is worried that this agreement will not bring the promises that the Ma Ying-jeou administration claims that it will bring. And some people are critical that the ECFA really did not provide the benefits that were promised by the Ma Ying-jeou administration. But I think there really is this existential component. There is a sense that an agreement with the mainland is very different than a free trade agreement with other countries. So the free trade agreement that was signed with Singapore, with New Zealand, went through the legislative Yuan in Taiwan without any problem. There was bipartisan agreement. And I think going forward, there will be bipartisan agreement for other free trade agreements with other countries. But the mainland, this touches a sore nerve, and it gets very much entangled in domestic politics in Taiwan. And so this has become very, very controversial.
So given this rather extreme political backlash on Taiwan, do you think that we're going to see a slowdown or even maybe a temporary halt in the warming of cross-strait ties? It seems like domestically, Ma Ying-jeou might not want to risk a repeat of this incident.
Well, there has already been a small impact on cross-strait relations. There was supposed to be a visit by the head of the mainland's Taiwan Affairs Office to Taiwan soon. That visit has been postponed. There have also been some provincial party secretaries or governors that also postponed their visits. But I don't think that this will have a very negative impact on the cross-strait relationship. Ma Ying-jeou's agenda for the cross-strait relationship in his remaining 2 years in office is really quite modest. When he first came into power in 2008, he was ambitious. He talked about the possibility of a peace treaty between the two sides of the strait and cross-strait military CBMs. He has really scaled back that ambitious agenda. What he hopes to do in the coming few years is to establish a representative office on the mainland and have the mainland set up a representative office in Taiwan. So that is a fairly modest objective compared to some of the things that he had talked about doing very early in his tenure. And I think for the mainland, there will not be much, there will really not be punishment of Taiwan for delaying the passage of this trade agreement, and potentially the mainland may have to agree to renegotiate it. And they won't be happy, but I think that China will do it. But the strategy that the Chinese are pursuing of providing more economic carrots to Taiwan to try and promote economic integration, which they hope will lead to political integration in the long run, I don't see them reconsidering that strategy in the near term.
And you mentioned earlier that you didn't think there would be a similar backlash to other free trade agreements. So do you think other countries are going to look at this and be at all concerned about their own negotiations with Taiwan, or especially as Taiwan is thinking about joining the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Well, I don't think that it will have an impact on bilateral free trade agreements. As I said, there really is bipartisan support for bilateral free trade agreements. The TPP is another story. And the problem here is that the mainland has quietly told Taiwan that this trade and services agreement must be ratified before the mainland is going to support Taiwan entering multilateral trade agreements. That means the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the RCEP, and TPP. Now, of course, China is not a member of it's not one of the negotiating partners of TPP. But China can use its influence to pressure one of the 12 TPP negotiating countries to not permit Taiwan to join down the road once the original agreement is concluded. And I think that Taiwan's potential membership will not be considered in this initial stage. It would be later. And potentially China might seek to join in the second tranche of countries also. But if Taiwan is qualified, if it's ready, and the mainland is not, that's going to raise issues. And then even if Taiwan is ready and other countries support it, and it has to get support from all of the TPP members, China could still put pressure on some of those TPP members to not allow Taiwan to join. And if this agreement in services is not ratified, then I think Beijing might use that as an excuse. So it could create obstacles down the road.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. But thank you so much for helping us sort through these issues.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. Once again, I'm Shannon Tiesi from The Diplomat.